Hello everyone, this will be the 7th chapter of The Second Life of the Guardian, written and read by Insect Overlord. This chapter is titled, Therapy is for Those with Trauma. Izuku doesn't have trauma. Izuku's first therapy session was much less scary than he feared. His therapist, a man named Oboro, had wispy blue hair, almost like clouds, and a large scar over his right eye, which stayed closed. He was also missing his right arm. Despite his scarring and limb difference, he didn't look intimidating. In fact, he was actually really good with kids. Even if Izuku wasn't technically a kid, he still found himself getting along with the man. At his first session, after his parents left and before Oboro even got the chance to introduce himself again, Izuku grilled him about his patient confidentiality policy. He knew therapists weren't supposed to share what their patients told them unless they were a threat to themselves or others, but Izuku wasn't sure if this applied to kids his age. He would have researched it himself, but his parents had been keeping a much closer eye on him since what he dubbed the incident, so it was much harder to sneak away to the computer at night. Izuku was led out of the waiting room his parents met Oboro in, and into a small, cozy room. There were shelves towards the back with all sorts of board games and fidget devices, a few types of drawing supplies, and a wide selection of chairs. Izuku eyed the beanbag for a long moment, but chose to sit in the large armchair in the end. The man started to speak. "Hello, Izuku-kun. My name is—" Izuku held up his hand to stop him. "I already know," he stated rudely. His maman would have scolded him if she heard. "Before we start, I have a few questions." If the therapist was shocked by his rudeness or how well he spoke, he didn't let it show. Instead, he waved his hand at Izuku, prompting him to continue. "First," Izuku held up one small, chubby finger, "I want to know how much you're going to tell my parents. If I'm going to talk about my problems, I don't want it getting back to them. Or the government, for that matter." He muttered the last part. Oboro frowned a bit. Well, children generally don't have a legal right to privacy, but in the case of my agency, we make parents sign a paper that says they agree to our confidentiality rules before we take on any new clients. He explained slowly. "If you want, we can go over it together. I can explain any parts you don't understand." Izuku waved him off. "Okay, but you won't need to explain anything. I'll understand it. I just need you to read it, 'cause I can't do that yet." The agreement essentially said his parents would get a monthly update on how Izuku was doing, but any specifics he brought up would be kept confidential unless it was dangerous to do so. Izuku was impressed. Maybe he could do this therapy thing after all. But Izuku was nothing if not cautious, so he decided to test the man. Hypothetically, say I robbed a bank. If I told you I did that a long time ago, but wasn't in crime anymore, would you tell? He looked amused. "As long as you aren't robbing banks anymore, no, Izuku-kun." He crossed the room and grabbed some things off the shelf. "Would you like to color? We've got crayons, markers, and pencils." Izuku perked up. "Do you have Prismacolor markers? I love those." Oboro looked confused. "I'm not sure I've heard of that brand before. I can look for them and try to have them for you by next session if you want." Izuku nodded eagerly. His therapist rolled over a portable table and placed the supplies on it so Izuku wouldn't have to leave his comfy chair. Then he scooted his own chair closer. "Hey, Oboro, if I was some prodigy artist, you promise not to tell Mom?" He could tell the man was fighting back a smile, but he nodded seriously. "Not if you tell me not to." "Good, because I pretended to eat a magazine on my birthday so my mom wouldn't think I was good at art." Oboro looked slightly disturbed and very concerned. "Why would you do that, Izuku-kun?" Izuku sighed, sounding like he had the weight of the world on his tiny 4-year-old shoulders. "I want to live normal this time. No being special or chosen. I just want to be normal boy-girl Izuku." "Boy-girl?" "Well, yeah, I'm a boy and a girl, so boy-girl," Izuku stated. He thought that was obvious. "Ah, I see." He didn't look like he truly did see, but chose to leave the topic be. Izuku could be whatever he wanted to be. "Why don't you want to be special?" Izuku stopped drawing and looked down at his paper. It was a picture of Tiki. She was eating a cookie and frozen mid-laugh. Izuku remembers that he had told her something particularly funny that day. I don't want to be special. It hurts to be special. You have to protect everyone else, and then who's left to protect you? His voice was quiet and broken. He sniffled and rubbed his eyes. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Oboro looked like he wanted to push, but didn't want to upset the child. It was easy to forget how young Izuku was when he talked like he was much older, but it was times like these that made him look so small. That's all right. We don't have to talk about anything you don't want to, Oboro placated. Instead, they spoke about little things, like how school was going and Izuku's hobbies. He went on an especially long rant on whales and why they're so amazing. Overall, Izuku felt lighter than he had in a long time. He was looking forward to his next session with Oboro. Izuku was on edge. Things in his life had been going well. Better than well, actually. His mom had taken off work to stay home with him while his dad left on another business trip to America. He got to spend time with his mom, and he didn't have to see his dad's ugly face for a whole week. It was awesome. But that was just the thing. Nothing ever stayed good for Izuku. So Izuku was on edge, waiting for something to give. He was lying on his cot at preschool, watching the ceiling. Normally, nap time was Izuku's favorite part of the day. He got to spend an entire hour without hearing the screaming of 11 other children. Today, though, Izuku wished it would end already. There was nothing to distract him from his raging thoughts. What if a villain attacked his preschool? Izuku could protect himself, but what about the other kids? What about the teachers? Ashido-sensei was too kind. She couldn't fight villains. Oh, Kwame, what if a villain attacked his mom? Izuku was spared from finishing that thought by the sound of a gentle song beginning to play. Finally, their wake-up alarm. Izuku rolled off his cot, taking his blanket with him. He stood up from his fluffy prison, quickly folding the duvet, and ran over to May's cot. She was still rubbing her eyes groggily, the sun from the window bouncing off her lightly freckled face. May, hey May, want to play a game? Izuku said, punctuating every word with a poke to her cheek. Izuku thought her grumpy little face was cute. She tried in vain to swat his hand away and go back to sleep, but eventually gave in and sat up. Can I be the flamethrower? She croaked out, her voice heavy with sleep. Izuku wasn't sure how that would work, but was happy to indulge her. Okay, Mei-chan. Izuku grabbed her hand and hefted her to her feet. He bounced on the balls of his feet while he waited for her to fold her blanket. After what felt like an eternity, she finally finished and trailed after a speeding Izuku to the shelf of toys. Recently, May had been especially interested in the builder set. Whereas before she refused to play with anything other than blocks, now she would use cardboard and plastic screws to build things. And by things, Izuku means exclusively flamethrowers. Together, they played with their creations like they would action figures. Izuku had a suspiciously well-built doll that looked like All Might, and May had her flamethrower she called Marcy. When asked why, she said she named it that to sound like mercy, which was what people would tell her after she set them on fire. May was a little violent. Izuku happily lost himself in the game. It was almost enough that he forgot his previous mood. Maybe things would be okay. This concludes Chapter 7 of The Second Life of the Guardian. Thank you so much for listening.